Hey
Hi,
Vivian.
hi Alice. How are you?
Great. It's great to finally meet you.
I know, yeah, it's great to meet you as well. I'm really excited about this Twitter space and to be co-hosting it with y'all.
Same here.
Um, I guess we have everyone here, right?
Yeah, let's get
A
started.
Twitter space is starting on time. I love it. We're already off to a really good start. Um, I guess I'll go. Oh, Jimmy, or I'm getting some messages. Okay, Jimmy is here. Okay, great. Um, Sorry about that. I was getting some messages that maybe Jimmy was unable to join. Hi, my name is Vivian. I'm excited to be speaking with y'all today on our new arrivals Twitter Spaces. We're chatting with Jimmy Edgar and Alice and Sinzi of Vellum. I feel like y'all could do a better job of. I want to hear introductions from y'all, if you don't mind getting into it.
Yeah, sure. I can start. Hi everyone. I'm Sinzi Velicescu. I'm the director and curator of Vellum LA. We are a physical NFT backed gallery in Los Angeles, and we're located in Hollywood.
Cool. Jimmy, do you wanna jump in?
Yeah, sure. Hey everyone, how's it going? I'm Jimmy. I'm a digital artist and musician slash sound designer. And I see all of my work as sculpture, actually, which is kind of like the process that I go through to create. And we can get into that a bit later. I love exploring the ideas of the material, immaterial works, and the dematerialization of works, and sort of the essence, absence, and ascension of this, especially in the digital domain. And yeah, that's a pretty decent intro, and happy to be here.
It's a great intro if I ever heard one. I'm excited to get into those subjects.
Cool. Me too. I'll briefly introduce myself. My name is Alice. I'm Ukrainian. I'm an independent curator and also a culture producer at Vellum LA. And my journey started in 2016 when I opened Experimental Arts Center in Kyiv, Ukraine, in my hometown. And we were doing a lot of like performances in virtual reality and actually showcasing a lot of like digital artwork. And that was pretty revolutionary for Ukraine at that time. And then I just moved to LA and the ball is keep rolling. So I guess we'll get into that more later.
Yeah, I feel like this is a great jumping off point because I feel like everybody sort of briefly discussed themselves, but I'm kind of curious about like y'all's career trajectories and how you ended up in the NFT space, either as like artists or curators. And then maybe we can get into how that leads into how the show came about to being.
Yeah, who wants to go first?
Since you can go, I guess.
I can go first. Yeah, so I guess my background, I had been curating digital art, actually all kinds of art, but focus on digital art for the last 10 years for large scale like media installations. So basically, curating digital art in the physical space was sort of like part of my DNA for a long time. And a lot of the artists that I was curating within these spaces started selling really well in the NFT space, and I realized that there wasn't really a physical space dedicated to showcasing their works. There was a lot of like online galleries, and everybody who had been doing physical galleries weren't really doing it properly. So I sort of that's kind of how Vellum was born, out of the necessity to create an IRL space for this work to be seen in its proper form. So that's how I got here.
Yeah, I want to touch upon that later, but when you said a lot of spaces aren't doing sort of like digital NFT art shows properly, like I'd love to hear your thoughts about that later. And also, um, I would love this to just be conversational. So like please feel free to just like talk over each other if somebody's saying something that jumps off an idea for you. Just like feel free to start talking or just ask each other questions. But yeah. Alice, I cut you off.
Oh, definitely not. So I think my journey is really interesting because I was the most skeptical person about NFT space, and I'm still is probably. But I was curating new media art for the last 6 years, and I was mostly curating like a lot of online exhibitions. And to be honest, we had a hard time to sell digital art, and people were very confused. Why should they buy digital files? And of course, all those questions. So why can I just like download it from Vimeo or somewhere else? And why should I buy it? So I curated a couple online projects like Post-Human Island, Webtara, with like a lot of artists involved, a lot of international forces involved. And then when NFT became a thing, we started like discovering that there are not that many like actually conceptual artists are in a space. And that's why the space was not super interesting to me at the beginning. But I think right now everything changed, and I see a lot of like great artists joining the space, and curators and like thinkers. And I believe like NFT literally changing the way how like artists can think about their work. And it's been a beautiful journey with Vellum for the last 7 months, including Jimmy's exhibition.
Yeah, so for me, I had always considered myself a visual artist, but actually I had really jumped into music and have been doing that for the better part of the past 20 years. And I always saw music making as a process of sculpture. If you can think about music as an invisible medium, and the medium is air pressure. So this is a lot how I think about all of my practice, is sort of like this subtractive process of coming up with ideas and then subtracting it down to the essential ideas. And so, yeah, I'd been doing a lot of visual art mixed with my music and performing it all over the world, and like creating these like musical experiences and videos. I also lived in New York for years and did fashion photography. And that also for me was a process of sculpting, particularly with light. So when I got more into like 3D artwork, it was very much like about the material and also sculpting with light, but sort of in a more illusion type fashion because it's normally presented on a display monitor. So it's kind of this play between dimensions, which I really love. And it's all related to my interest in metaphysics as well. I think basically when COVID went down, I got pretty disillusioned with performing and traveling. And so I wanted to imagine like an ascension of the club experience, I suppose, like a music experience that is more in line with my love for conceptual art and pop art and things like this. So it was like doing this show with Vellum has been amazing because it really feels like a good trajectory from presenting art and music in like a festival or club type format, and sort of like ascending up the dimensions and making it a little bit more focused on the visuals and the ideas, which I'm super excited about.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, sorry, go on.
let's all just go.
Let's all
Yay!
just go.
Let's
Okay.
just go.
Let's all just go. I just wanted to piggyback on that because Vivian, you were asking about sort of the physical experience and sort of the displaying of the work, and I don't know that there is any right or wrong way to do it. I think that experimenting and coming up with like new and innovative ways to sort of pair, like different disciplines together is kind of what we're trying to do. And I think that we really managed to do that with Jimmy's show. And we've done a few shows in the past that were a little bit more on the immersive side. And we're just really interested in creating like different experiences that are just sort of like outside of the box, not just like a stark gallery space. Like you have, all of these different forms interacting with each other, basically.
Um, I had a question about Jimmy, you've mentioned like immateriality, and I was wondering if you could sort of speak to that. And then I think after you explain that, I'll have a follow-up question.
Yeah, totally. So what I love about like all of my practice specifically is considering like what material is. So the definition of material is basically like what a substance is made from. So like we were talking about music, it's made out of air pressure. We talk about photography, it's made out of like reflections and light. But when we get into digital, like the digital domain, it gets really it's like debatable on what the material is, because even like digital is its thing, but we don't think of it as physical, even though it's a purely physical process. Like the data's on hard drives, the displays are physical. There's all these new crazy like inherent properties of digital, which is kind of like another dimension. And it's kind of like also related to conceptual art, because conceptual art is kind of like based on the ideas, and the images are said to be like perfunctory, which are kind of like maybe not as important as the ideas. So I feel like my art practice and a lot of people's art practice are heading towards this world of like immateriality. And so, this comes from my love and my research into metaphysics and also quantum physics, which also gets into the immaterial. So yeah, I know there's a lot to unpack there, but that's kind of like the rough summary of the idea.
I think that's a really great way of just summarizing it, and I think how those ideas inform, I guess, some of the previous works that you've done, as well as the work that's in the show that's in Vellum. Um, I had a question about whether or not you see these works and your art practice not necessarily as like an either or, but like an embodying of like multiple things at once. I just want to make sure I'm like understanding.
Yeah, so this is kind of like my love for it
Mm-hmm.
is the transgression between the material and the immaterial. So like, the physical piece that I presented, it was called Oxygen. It's presented as a piece of it, like air. It's essentially just raw air. So that as an idea and as a material is like, challenging for some people. But as I was like kind of talking about before, is like I spent the better part of my practice sculpting air pressure. So I feel like it's sort of like related in that sense. But to answer your question, yeah, I'm super obsessed with phases of matter, like solid, plasma, gaseous elements, and the metaphors of like transitioning between them, like condensation, evaporation. And I feel like they're super symbolic of like transmutation, whether it's with the self or with artwork.
Yeah, I think that's really beautiful. And I love hearing you talk about like, I don't know, music is like shaped like sculpting air. Um, sorry, I feel like I'm talking a lot now, and I didn't mean for it to turn into like me, the one asking questions. I guess, should we get into discussing more about the pieces within the show and some of your thinking or Vellum's thinking about how it was curated? How did y'all come together to put this? Like how how much of a collaboration was it? Like was it a collaboration at all?
Well, I can start about it and like do a little intro for the show for people who like didn't come to the opening. So Oxygen basically compares like 13 artworks, and all of this work is like new work by Jimmy. And actually, I never asked Jimmy how long did you work on it, because that's something I would love to know. But each of them like have really interesting like naming, but also I like that you symbolizing in your work new technology, consumerism, luxury, cleanliness, and just like you're using Dyson products as a reference for the hand dryer. And I wonder if you can expand why you were inspired to like use this product and why you decided to go that direction.
Yeah, so the show, let's see, I had sort of like came around the idea of oxygen and air, like we were talking about, like sculpting air pressure. I felt like it was kind of like subtracting the sculpting process down to the essential idea, which is like air. And how can I present that? How can I, like, I was asking myself, what is the desire of air? How would it want to be presented? You know, how I thought of it as like a sentient being. And I just wanted to like really put some love into like what oxygen and air is and how we interact with it. And I mean, really, I just kind of, I just went into Vellum one day with my friend and introduced myself to Alice, and I really loved the.
By the way, I quickly will jump in because I saw it when Jimmy and Sebastian came. I saw there's just like random people from Melrose want to use the restroom in the gallery. That was kind of embarrassing later.
Oh my God, that's hilarious! So I came
Yeah,
in.
I never told you that. Yeah, but
No, I came in and I loved the show that was going on. It was like this generative thing going on. I thought it was super beautiful. I really
about
went in. I really went in there to check out the screens because I was like thinking, you know, I was setting the intention like it would be super dope to do something in here. And basically after that, we kind of kept in touch, and I just started pretty much like that day I started working more on the idea, researching and making the works for the actual screens and the sizes. So like the work is completely made for the space.
which is actually very unusual, right, in the art world, because sometimes people just like pick the work which is like already ready, and I think that's why the show looks very special, because you literally work with the space and like put the pieces in imaginary space first and then in the physical space.
Yeah, it was like a very seamless like workflow for us for sure. Because Jimmy, you basically designed the whole thing like with the space in mind, which we haven't really. I mean, we've had that done before, but it was, like when I came to look at all of the works on the screens for the first time, I was like, oh well, that's incredible. And Jimmy, you did propose as well the entire concept to us, like with all of the different works, uh, and that's kind of how we were first introduced to it, and that was great as well.
Yeah, I should say like even for artists listening is like I think it's so important to develop things for something in mind, like setting an intention and just doing your best. Um, and this is just an example, and something I often do is like I'll set my sights super high and just go for it and just put myself out there. And I think it's really important for artists to have the confidence and the belief to do that. And in this particular case, like it turned out amazing and wonderful. I'm super grateful. But I think even if it doesn't work out, I think it's really good practice to sort of set your intention, which is essentially like a container for energy to go into, and just fill it with like love and good energy and just do your best, and something amazing will always come out of it.
I think it made me think about that artist as its own agent, and I wonder what do you think about it, because right now basically the artist should like promote themselves, also do the work, also do the proposal, and that's kind of exhausting in many ways because of course as an artist you just want to like make art, but what is your opinion on actually like being your own agent? Even I know that you had an agent before, and how do you like manage to do that?
Yeah, I think this is a crucial topic to talk about, because just for a like really basic example, like I have good friends that have had insane success and they're not really even present on social media, which is a good lesson, because I think there's an archetype these days of like the super thirsty artist that's just like pushing and trying to selling and like, exalting all of this energy, trying to promote themselves, when that energy could be spent on perfecting your craft and putting love into what you do. And like art is like, it's like a pet, or it's like a child. It's a creation. It's like a plant that you're like watering. It's like a garden. So I think that my belief is that the more love that you put into something, the more like things that you do to convince yourself that they're amazing and worthy and valuable and all this stuff, that will in turn attract the right people eventually, if you just stay the course. So, I've seen examples of huge success without doing crazy things on social media and stunting and stuff. So that's pretty much my belief.
I love that. That's really like Buddhist approach.
Yeah, it's really about doing your best, and like I believe reality to be this like kind of like harmonic resonator, and the more good vibes you put into your stuff and the more belief you have, people will like intrinsically, telepathically pick up on that. That's why they say like being authentic is the best way to be, because I think people are inherently telepathic and pick up on those vibes. So you might as well just be real.
The immateriality of vibes, love. Uh, um, I don't want to backtrack at all, but because y'all were discussing how the work was made with the Vellum space in mind, I just want to let the listeners know that there's like a pinned tweet in the Twitter spaces where you can see what the show looks like, which it looks incredible. I'm looking forward to seeing it when I go back to LA. Um, Jimmy, just hearing you talk about just your thoughts about like authenticity and vibes. I was reading your, I think, Paper magazine interview, which I guess we can also pin in here if anybody wants to look at it later. But um, you mentioned like you love to see everything as art and that you think of everything as art. And I'm curious about, I guess, how that influences like your thinking around creating. I feel like it's a sentiment that I can kind of relate to. Like I stand in the sunshine and I'm like, this is art, which sounds kind of funny, but I believe it. And yeah, I'm just curious how like this sort of open, expansive idea about what can be art and how that like influences your art practice.
Yeah, one of my favorite artists is Yves Klein, and it's rumored that one of his first pieces of art was that he signed the sky and claimed the sky as an artwork. And I just love this idea so much. It's like, wow, art can really be anything. And I mean, even if you look at the definition of art, you're like, wow, yeah, everything is art. So I really love this discourse when people argue about work, and especially about my work, and they say, oh, this isn't art, like air can't be art. It's like, well, maybe you should check the definition actually. So like I really love that idea, but I also like critiquing art, what's good or bad, because like being on the periphery of like what's good or what's bad or what triggers people or what people like, I think is amazing. And essentially, I think safe art is like super dangerous. I think it, you know, I mean, yeah, safe art is like not that interesting. That's why meme culture is like such a big thing today. But yeah, I think that anything can be art, and I love to like push myself to to have provocative ideas that people might not consider as art. And I always love to, like when I meet someone new, I love to ask them, so like, what do you think is an art? And I've heard such wild, crazy answers to that it always inspires me to create new works.
Speaking of is an art of art, I know we had this conversation in person and NFT Tuesday when you were giving the talk, but we were kind of like briefly talking about Jeff Koons, and you explained why you were inspired by him, and maybe I think you can also talk about it a little bit here, because your work is like the balls and just the reference him. So I think that's interesting.
Yeah, I do really love, I love pop art, and I love making references to pop art, only if only because it's so like hated and loved at the same time. Like I do love Jeff Koons. It's not so much his work, it's the way that he talks about his work, and he's so convinced and confident, and he does it in such a loving way, which feels super authentic. And so that mixed with the fact that so many people hate him just really is super interesting to me. And it's the same with like Alec Monopoly and Damien Hirst and several other artists that I find super interesting, is their ability to really trigger people. And I think like I started realizing this when I was creating my piece called Unreal, which is just a single pixel NFT, like it's just a magenta pixel. And I think that it was like fairly interestingly received on social media, but it wasn't really until it sold till then it became like kind of like a meme, and people attacking it, and then people having like really liked it. And I just love this ability to divide people, because it moves the conversation along about like, what is artwork, what can it be, and ultimately it really just brings people together too, which I love too.
Did you get any like negative feedback about Oxygen? Just wondering, like the thing like you got about Pixel.
Yeah.
Can
Yeah.
actually, sorry, not to cut you off, but just for the audience, if y'all want to like describe the oxygen piece, so in case they aren't aware of what it looks like, and then get into what kind of responses you might have gotten from it.
Also, we have it pinned for anybody that wants to see it as well. It's like the fifth pin.
Yeah, so Oxygen is the basic idea is the material. It's a physical sculpture, so it's presented in like a black monolith in a glass display box, and what you see is essentially nothing inside of it, because the material of the sculpture is oxygen, it's air. And yeah, I definitely overheard a lot of mixed comments at the show and online. which range from people being super upset, frustrated, enjoyed it, like thought it was funny. There was like really a crowd gathered around it the whole night, sort of like taking pictures and laughing and pointing, and I just love this like divisive reactions to it, because it's like it provokes people to think about it, and also it's like very much feels like something I would do, because personally I love putting a bit of humor in work. I love pushing buttons. I love things that are different and unique, and kind of like pushes ideas. So yeah, it's my first physical piece that was presented, so I think I'm super happy with it.
Yeah, I can relate to sort of wanting to create or maybe do something that sort of creates like a response that isn't necessarily uniform, and how that in a way creates dialogue. I'm curious to hear more about some of the other pieces that are in the show, maybe some of the ones that are pinned, and just like a bit more about your thinking when you were making these pieces.
Yeah. Um, One thing I really loved there, like, so a couple of the pieces are basically digital ready-mades, like conceptual sculptures of Dyson products, which I've used before, and I really love Dyson as a company. I think they make very interesting products, and they're very much like have a cool aesthetic. And there was like a moment where there was some girls around it doing TikTok videos with it, and one of them turned around and was like, "Oh my God, you're the artist. This piece really speaks to me." And I just love that, because I thought, wow, it's not really what I expected, but I thought it was super interesting. But yeah, Dyson products are very interesting, like symbolically to me, because one, they're super current, they're like new, so that is already, a lot of times like conceptual work is kind of like makes historical references, so there's not too much historical reference. And I did a lot of research about Dyson on Twitter, just to kind of gauge like what people think about it, and it's super interesting when you look into what people say about Dyson products. It's like people feel like when they've got it, they've sort of like ascended into adulthood. They feel like it's a luxurious symbol of like becoming like a better person. Um, some people make fun of it because they're really expensive. It's just super interesting, like people's view about it. So yeah, I think it's like a really fun symbol and metaphor to put into artwork. And then also, they both activate air somehow. And so I don't know, there's like so many different ways you could look at it. You could even see it as a symbol of death in a way, because when you dry something out, you take the moisture out and it dies. Like it could be, yeah, there's lots of different ways, but I love these symbols that are able to like go many different ways.
Yeah, I feel like it just from like reading about your work, looking at about your work, hearing you speak in this Twitter spaces, like you seem to be really interested in these things that are many things at once. And like not like almost not necessarily saying something is one thing or another, but it's like it's all of these things at once. Like it is a thing, like Dyson products are a thing that is like luxurious and aspirational, but also like maybe like expensive and like silly or something. So it's just like interesting that this is a thing that seems to be like across a lot of your works.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like I said before, when I was talking about safe art is super dangerous. if something's too much of what it is, or if there's like too much ego in it, I think it becomes uninteresting for people and community to like invest themselves into, not necessarily financially, just energetically. And so, yeah, I find it when it's like divisive and sort of like confusing, it has this ability to hold your attention and your awareness to have that question, have that dialogue with it. Because if something is like straight to the point and obvious, you just kind of, for me, I just look at it and then kind of like scroll away or turn away, because, you know, everything's so fast today. It's like, oh, okay, I got the point, next. But if something's able to hold your awareness and question it and wonder about it and have all these mixed feelings about it, I think that's a really amazing place to be.
Yeah, I totally hear that. I feel like sometimes it can be frustrating to like watch a movie or read a book or look at a piece of art and just be like, cool, like I know what you were trying to tell me. I absorbed it in like 5 seconds. Um,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
like you told me what you were saying instead of me looking at it and like figuring it out on my own or something. Like I feel like the intention of art is to like prompt a thought.
That's hilarious that you say that, because I have this problem, or this issue or challenge, that I can never finish like the last chapter of a book, and I can never finish any movie because I get kind of like sad and depressed that I was just like propagated this idea. And I think that, yeah, it's cool to let your imagination run wild. I think that's also why I love David Lynch. He's like an amazing
Yeah.
director, because he's really inspired me to create stories and inject confusion and play with those emotions, to like surprise you, which is actually something, this is kind of funny, which I don't really tell people about, but I actually studied neuro-linguistic programming and hypnosis for a few years. And this is like a really central idea to capturing someone's awareness, is by, like, there's a thing that you can do, which is called a handshake induction. If you shake a person's hand, if you like go to shake it and you actually grab their wrist, you have about 5 seconds to like hypnotize them, or like subconsciously embed an idea at that moment, because they're so confused that you just interrupted a subconscious program to them, that you have this like moment to like embed ideas. And I think this is super related to art.
I also see that being super related to internet culture and like memes, sort of. Uh,
Definitely.
Yeah, 100%.
yeah, I feel like I've definitely seen like New York subway fight videos and like somebody just like does something absurd between two fighting people and then it like just like like in that moment those people are so confused that they stop.
Yeah,
Um,
and also media, like there's often like media's tactics to get your attention is to have a story that, and movies do this too. It will be like, have a story that triggers you, followed up with a story that like relieves you, like maybe like a cute dog or a cute cat or something, and then follow that up with something that like really triggers you. And this like contrast of emotions is literally nothing but a tactic to just hold your awareness on something.
Was your oxygen sculpture, the physical sculpture, like immaterial sculpture with the air, actually this like handshake? Or you didn't think about it this time, like to just catch the attention or to provoke the person or just get them?
Yeah, I think it's definitely like a provocation in a way. Um, but I think most of all, it's really like talking about like what is physical. So it's kind of like embracing the invisible in a way. Like we were talking about music being invisible. We don't really ever think that music is invisible, but it is. And so,
Total. Oh,
Yeah, it's just
Confucian is invisible too. Sorry, I'm cutting you off. I'm just like inserting your thoughts back in there.
no, it's cool. But it's just it's really related to the digital world because it was also an NFT as like a certificate of authenticity. But what are you getting? You're getting a token that says you own air. Well, what air? Where is the air? Did you put the air in it? Like, is it how is that able to be displayed again? Like, it's just all these questions about what the heck is it? And I love that.
I also think. Oh, sorry, Sinzi. Did I cut you off?
Oh no, you know, go ahead. I'll follow
I
up.
also just that made me think that every time when I'm in a gallery and people coming see the art, including like your exhibition, Jimmy, people just usually ask, "Oh, would I get a display if I would buy the artwork?" And this is the most common question like I'm getting like every single day, which is kind of, I think people not used to like get nothing when they're like buying something, or they just so used to materiality. So even the whole concept of NFT for people just seems like scam because they like cannot just accept that they're not getting this display with the NFT.
Yeah, I also wanted to follow up on what you said about music being sort of this invisible thing and like the concept of like something that's intangible that's being experienced. And you have a background as a musician. And actually, that's how when Alice when Alice was like, "Oh, Jimmy Edgar came into the gallery," I'm like, "Oh, you mean the musician?" Like I was like, I knew you as a musician before you became a digital artist, a conceptual artist. And so how would your background in music, how has that like sort of informed your like direction in this space and sort of the evolution of what you've come to do?
Yeah, well, I should say I got into music originally to be a visual artist. It just kind of happened that the music kind of caught fire and I had success there. But I always saw myself as a visual artist. And that's why I say that music always feels like sculpting because it's like I have this sort of like pseudo synesthesia with the act of creating it. But yeah, I think that it all kind of informs each other, I guess. It's just I'm not really like I love using different mediums. I love doing photography and I draw and I sketch. Like all the creation of Oxygen went through a huge process of like coming up with ideas, like just thoughts and writing them down and then sketching and then sort of like collaging. And so I have this really long process of how to do that, which is like sculpting and also the same process that I use in music. So I consider myself like a conceptual artist in the sense that I don't really care about the medium. I can just if I have an idea, like it could be any medium. Like actually I'm working on a big photography project right now, which feels like the same process as just using cameras and lighting. So I love as we go further into digital media that the idea is really the important part. And this is also something that I really love. Like I just got DALL-E access
Me,
and
me too.
oh, it's amazing. Like it just makes me realize that wow, artists are really going to be tested on their ideas because I kind of got a bad taste in my mouth at first about DALL-E because everything that I saw was like whatever to me. Like I don't know, I only saw a few interesting things. But it wasn't until I started really like putting in my own prompts that I was like, wow, holy crap, this is amazing. And it just makes you think like all you really need is a good idea. And I'm all about moving forward with this kind of technology.
Especially I feel when the medium are changing so much right now. And like you can do paintings in VR and tomorrow maybe with some new tool. I think the idea is actually what matters and I can relate it.
Yeah, and also like I think this is important for artists to understand too, is like there's a huge difference between being a artisan or like a craftsman and an artist, which most artists are kind of like both. But there is a lot of like creators that are just really skilled at maybe software or like whatever, but they're lacking the conceptual ideas to really engage with people. And I think that's we're seeing this in NFTs so much because I don't know, we're like understanding what like why is this valuable? Why is this selling? And it's just a whole mix of really there's a whole mix of like artisanal creators, like skilled craftsmen, sort of like you imagine like a swordsmith in the centuries ago, like that was really good at building swords, but they didn't have the capacity to like use it, you know. And I think we see that a lot in digital art, is that like there's a lot of skilled craftsmen, but they don't necessarily understand that there needs to be like a big like conceptual idea behind it.
I also think that goes for a lot of the collectors as well. And I feel like part of what we've been striving to do in this space is to sort of draw like a thread around the works that we show and sort of contextualize everything, and sort of have like a storytelling approach. So it's not just like bam, bam, here's all this art. It's like, pausing to stop and think about why is this here and what is the meaning of it, and how does it relate to previous work that's been put out. And so that's kind of what we're trying to do. And that's why we love the collection that you put forward so much, because it has so much dialogue with previous work, and it just has a story to tell, essentially.
Yeah, I think we can also talk a little bit about the future. Like, what are you working on right now, Jimmy, and what is like the next project should be or would be?
Yeah, I haven't announced it yet, but I mean, I can talk about it since I mean there isn't like an insane amount of people here. But I'm working on a photography project, which it's called Operating Room, and what I've done is deconstructed a surgical operating room with like all of the devices, all of the tools into like 100 pieces. And right now I'm photographing them all. So actually, like, I'm walking around my studio right now and it's insane because I have like a dialysis machine. I have a C-arm, like 2,000-pound X-ray machine. There's like exam lights. There's an anesthesia machine, and like all these like crazy tools around. So basically, the idea is that it actually started out as a generative project, which I wrote this software that's codes. It like brings up variables and gives me ideas for works. And some of the prompts that came out were like, an artist builds a pharmacy in a tree house, and the pills are presented as sculptures. It comes up with like weird ideas like that based on my variables. And actually, one that popped out was an artist deconstructs a surgical operating room, and the photographs are available in a book. And yeah, I love the idea so much, and it came out of a generative program that I was like, I'm gonna see how far I can take this. So basically, I'm right in the middle of shooting it right now, and yeah, the aesthetic is cool. Like I'm shooting it all on acrylic non-glare mirror with like really bright neon lighting, not too dissimilar from the aesthetic of my work already, but this is like a move towards condensing these ideas more into like in real life works. So they do kind of look like renders because they're super highly retouched, but yeah, I'm super really excited about it because it's like looking amazing. So can't wait to present it to everyone.
I believe that I saw one photo of like lamp you posted, and is it like part of this project or it was like not related? And I was just thinking, is it render or is it like actual object in the studio? And I was very like not sure about it.
Yeah, so that was kind of like the test. There's probably still some on my Instagram stories and a little bit on TikTok too. But the idea is to kind of like blur the lines between like a photograph and a render. So they're like highly retouched because I have a lot of experience airbrushing from doing fashion photography when I lived in New York. So a lot of my fashion photography was like super airbrushed, like really plastic looking. And so, yeah, I love like meticulous details. So I really enjoy like really getting the pictures looking perfect because my studio isn't that big. So I have to kind of like rig everything to get it together. Like there's like like 5 pieces of acrylic on the ground. So there's like lines, there's scratches everywhere. Some of the surgical equipment I have is like older and dirty, so I have to like airbrush it to make it all perfect. And I really love just cleaning it up. I feel like I'm like cleaning like a hoarder's house or something.
Cool, and I think we can announce that starting next week at Vellum, the collection we will have from you, the objects will be on a view, and people who never saw it will be able to see it, right, Sinzi?
Actually, I think it's starting September 1st.
September 1st.
Yeah,
Okay.
so this week and the following week, you can still catch the Oxygen series. Yeah. And we've also pinned, the last tweet that I just pinned has a link to the entire collection. Some of the works have already sold. Congrats, Jimmy, on that, and including Oxygen. But there's some work still available, and they're all listed for 1.11 each on Foundation.
Yes, go get him, Tiger.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so we're going to present Objects, which is my larger generative collection. And it's basically like my work done in a generative form. So my 3D work, and it was based on like thousands of 3D images that are like PNGs, and I wrote a software or a script in P5.js because I have a little bit of coding experience, and basically just rendered out all these images like in a browser. And yeah, I really love the generative process. I feel like it's an amazing medium because you basically just invent this cloud of variables of like, so the way that I did it was like all these images that I love in my aesthetic, and the ability to like mix them around and show them or not show them based on random numbers. And it's so exciting to work that way because they're kind of like additions, but they're actually more like iterations. So I basically see it as one work with all these kind of like fractions of it. But I highly recommend artists who have that capacity to do something generative in their aesthetic, because it's really amazing to invent something and then let a computer kind of decide what to show based on your parameters. It's like, wow. Every time something new would pop out, it's like, wow, this, like, I never would have did that, but it's like kind of my vibe.
I don't want to derail this conversation too much, because I know we have 5 minutes left, but it's interesting hearing you describe it that way. It seems, I don't know. I feel like it must be like having a child or something. Like, oh, like this thing is me, but it's also like not me.
Yeah, so I guess like my whole interest in random numbers is a very metaphysical one because if you know about quantum physics, you know that the observation of something has a direct effect on it, even if it's at the quantum level. I usually make a pseudo new age jump to the idea that um, random numbers can be affected by humans just based on whatever. Actually, there's been studies like micro psychokinetic studies. There's like white papers on like the human's effect on that. And also, I had a really amazing conversation with Blake. I forgot his last name, but he was the Google engineer that got fired for claiming
The
AI.
AI was sentient.
Yeah, and he was also in agreement about, because I was asking him, I'm like, how much is randomness like in Lambda? Because that would mean that, there's a potential, a, a quantum potential that, there is some kind of like, it's hard to describe. We don't really have the vocabulary for it, but the sentience is kind of like a reflection of your interaction with it and has to do with quantum physics. Much like, I don't know, yeah, like you're saying, much how you like raise a child or raise a pet. They're like reflections of you because of your interaction with them. So I actually like make the huge jump and say that generative art is mildly related to that because of the propensity of randomness in art. And actually, like a funny like last point on that is randomness doesn't truly exist. It's totally an illusion. So it's just like a disguise for extreme complexity.
I probably would just like briefly add that I saw on Twitter Museum of Crypto Art was doing this like questionnaire. Would you let AI? Would you trust AI to suggest you some art? And majority of people voted no. And I was very surprised because like AI like is already everywhere and suggesting like us movies or where to go, restaurants based on what we like. And that's kind of something like you said, there is no such a thing as randomness. It's like the chain of the decisions we already made.
Yeah, that's also why people are normally afraid of and skeptical of algorithms. But like with my work in generative art and programming and a lot, I feel like you could really use it to your advantage, and you just have to, I mean, it's like anything, it's a tool. Like you don't say like, oh, I don't like hammers because they can like hurt people. Well, they also like build houses. It's the same with social media. Like, some people have really bad taste in their mouth about social media, but it's just another tool. So I think it's really like our judgment and belief on those things. That's actually the important part.
Um, with our last minute, do you have any final thoughts that you want to share? Maybe like parting words of wisdom that you want people to take away from this Twitter Spaces? Sorry, not to like hard pivot.
No, I said some zingers I'm happy about. But I just want to say thank you to all of you and everyone who's here. Thank you to Vellum. Thank you, everyone, for your support. I'm super grateful and I really appreciate it. And yeah, if you enjoyed it, let me know. Send me a DM. And yeah, thanks. I'm happy.
And thank you to the foundation as well. And The works are available for sale on Foundation, and you can come visit us at the gallery. We're open Thursday through Sunday, 1 to 6 p.m.
Yes, thank you, Vivian, for co-hosting the space, and thank you, Jimmy, for joining and like chatting with us.
Yeah, thank you for co-hosting. This was like the chillest Twitter Spaces I've ever done because y'all were helping a lot. Jimmy, thank you so much for talking through just like your thought processes and I don't know, artistic backgrounds. I really hope everyone sort of leaves this kind of like thinking about how they can, I don't know, push themselves and like think about something they did today that might be art that they didn't think was art before.
Love it.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Bye, have a good day.